Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the second part of this series for the Webflow and BuildShip Hackathon. I love to learn where you're tuning in from. Drop in a comment saying which part of the world you're tuning in from. And to kick this session off, we are excitedly running a hackathon now for the next duration of 1 month with Webflow team. And this is going to be something that you can build during the holidays, experiment, tinker, in igniting your building spirit. And the submissions for this hackathon is in January. So we are going to run this series of live streams to give you an idea, spark some inspiration, and also showcase how you can use the combination of these two tools. So the first video, the kickoff session, you might have seen. If not, I'll drop in a link for that right now in the chat. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to see the comment. Otherwise, we'll drop a link to all these resources after the video. So that session and that video talks a bit about how you can participate in this hackathon, how you can sign up, how you can submit, as well as give you a general overview of what it is to build an API or a workflow on BuildShip. Cool. So I'll also drop in the link for the hackathon itself. So make sure you sign in there, because then you'll get access and emails on all the events that are happening, as well as important information about the hackathon. All right, cool. So let's kick this off without much further ado, right? So this hackathon has a bunch of things that you can do. You can actually, it's open-ended hackathon. You can pretty much build anything. Hey, John. Hey, from Ecuador. That's awesome. So we're going to learn how you can actually build an API on BuildShip and then use it on Webflow. We'll start off with the basics, and then we will start building upon it to create advanced sections on it. So today we're going to see something like this, where you will create a website. We will actually post the template and clonable for the Webflow website as well as the BuildShip one right after this video below in the description. So some simple website like this, don't worry about the design here. You can obviously change the design and make it look amazing depending on your use case on Webflow with visual drag and drop interface that they have. But here, as you can see, these data cards, this is what you're going to do today, where we'll pull this information from API rather than the CMS. Now, what this gives us is the benefit of dynamic things. So dynamic data that is fetched real time from API every time this page is opened. It allows us to do filtering. It allows us to do some kind of like location-based pricing, depending on, like, say, wherever the location of the user that's viewing your website is. So you can start introducing dynamic app kind of experience to Webflow by plugging it as an API rather than a static CMS-based data. All right. So let's start that. And then on the Webflow side, we will be building this simple workflow. This is something we actually built last time already. I will just go over the high-level details of it. If you want detailed step-by-step instruction of how to build this workflow, you can head over to the previous series video in this. So to give you an idea, this is a data set we have. We have like some furniture company's data set. So it is the name of the furniture, the category, the material, and so on, the price and description. We want to pull this data via a workflow on BuildShip and create an API for it. Now, the good thing here is this data that you get here from Get Sheets node can be anything. It could be a database on Airtable. It could be on a Firebase or Superbase or Postgres database, any database you can think about. So we have lots of nodes here for almost all the databases that's out there. And you can actually take one of them and use it. For the purpose of this demo, we have taken the very simple and basic one like Get Sheets. So if you are using this, you just replace this with your own URL and obviously authenticate it for your data set. And then you can also give the sheet name that is available here. All right, so let's see what the basics of a workflow looks like. So a workflow contains inputs, a bunch of actions and then the output. Here, our input is basically the category, because on this Webflow website, we want users to be looking at the category and filtering them. Maybe they filter by sofa, by table, and so on. So you have this option to add this input called category. And then if the input is given or not, it's an additional optional field, you will fetch the data here. If there's no input of category, you'll fetch all the data from the spreadsheet. If you do have a filtered input of, say, a category like sofa, you'll fetch only that data set. And then what we are doing here is you can test individual nodes. So if I test this, for example, I'm saying the category is sofa. Let's see what comes back. Okay, let's wait a few seconds. Yeah, so it came back with all these data sets, right? Like everything that is category sofa. Now, let me zoom in a little bit here. Oops. Yeah. So as you can see that this is actually in a format that Webflow does not understand. So if I were to pass this right away like this to Webflow as an API, it might throw an error because it doesn't understand what to do with this data, and the structure it expects is a JSON. So here it's a JSON, but the values are inside this array with first item of the array being the headers and the rest being like this. So that's why we have a kind of formatting node here, which takes the array and converts into the JSON that we want. And if you go back to the previous video, we'll see that this one, we built it using AI. We just simply said, hey, here is a sample data. I want it to look like a JSON with the first value of the array to be the header, the keys of the JSON, and the rest to be the values. So it automatically created this logic. You can actually look at this logic as well, what it did, but you don't need to look or make any changes because we prompted the AI to do this node for us, and then finally created the array JSON for us. So every time this API is called, it comes back with this data. So let's test the entire workflow, make sure it's up and running fine before we move on to the Webflow side. Oh, okay. So maybe I'll just zoom in a bit like this. Is that layout better? Or actually, let's try some other layout. Maybe this layout is better. Okay, let me try to also zoom in when I'm talking so you can also see a bit better, hopefully. Okay. All right. Hopefully that's better, John. Okay, so let's get into it. So as you can see, the response came back. So instead of the previous array type of experience is now a JSON where every item in this JSON is mapped as a key value pair. So as you can see, it's in a format that Webflow likes, which is every item to be with its own key and label. Okay, maybe previous one format. All right, let's try again. Is this better zoomed in? I think this is a good one. Let's just stick to this one. Okay, so now on the Webflow side, now we have this workflow running from input to output, tested well. Let's make sure it's connected as well. So on BuildShip, you can have any kind of triggers. You have lots of options here, but we are going to be using the API one today. API one can be also get and post type of thing. Let's use get because Webflow side, it's much easier to build with a get request. And then for the purpose of this demo, we are kind of saying that, hey, this is the workflow's input map to your input of your workflow. So the category, if it comes in from Webflow side, it's mapped to the input here, and the output is whatever the workflow outputs. So you don't need to change anything here unless you're doing some customization. So the thing to understand about the workflow output is typically whatever is the output of your workflow, your API will send it back. But if you want to make certain kind of changes, like you want to make instead of always it being 200, you want it to be something custom. You want to set it to a variable in your workflow. You can do that by replacing this with variables. And we'll actually post a video on how to do that. But essentially on your workflow, you can have, say, many decision points like branching, where one workflow is successful and 200, you can set that variable to be 200, and on the other side, it can be something failure. But here in this demo, it's a very simple thing. It's an API that fetches data and gives it back. So it's always successful or not. And then the body of the workflow is basically the response. All right, perfect. So let's continue on. Let's make sure we are shipped, it's connected, and make sure it's shipped as well. If any recent changes, let's make sure it's shipped. And as you can see, it gives you this endpoint. That is exactly what you need done on the BuildShip side. Now let's head over to Webflow. Okay, so on the Webflow side, I have this basic website, right? Let me also zoom out a little bit. So yeah, this is the website I have. What we have done here is, obviously you can design it any way you want, but the main thing to highlight here is this cards section. So I added this card by clicking add element and adding this grid structure, right? So you added a grid structure, and then coming back here inside the grid structure. So there's a container and there's a, okay, let me zoom in here. Hopefully that's better. So inside this card, which is a section or a container, you can then have anything you want. So I have a grid inside which I have a card style. So before we dive into getting the data from the API and putting it in these cards, let's make sure the card is styled the way we want. So here I have just added one static card. I have given it some text variable, text kind of field for title, something for description, something for a category, something for a price. So you can add whatever data you want to show there. We had a bunch more data points, but I'm just picking these 4 for now. And then what you need to do is make sure each element has a style ID so that you can refer to this on Webflow when you connect the API and replace these items with the API fetched items. Okay, so I've set this up, this sample card. I have given this style for the card to be, the style selector to be called card style. And one more thing I've done is given another class called hidden and made sure this one is hidden when we publish the website, because we don't want the sample card to show up. We want the actual fetched card to show up, right? So for the purpose of making sure the API is connected and working fine, we keep this visible right now. So as you can see, if I go scroll all the way down, I think it's here somewhere. Yeah, so the display, it's at block. But if I make it none, the sample card will go away. So when we finally publish, we will make it none. But right now, let me keep it visible. Okay, so that's the card we have created. Now, obviously, we want to connect this to the API and fetch the data and put it in this card. So what we do is head over to the page, whatever your page that you are using this for. And inside this section here, edit settings, at the very bottom, you will have this section called body tag, where you need to place a sample script inside here. I will be pasting this exact sample snippet as well. If you clone this Webflow website, you will also get this as part of that bundle. I'll also put a link for this in GitHub gist as well. So you just go and copy this if you're not cloning the template and putting it in your existing page. But let's go through what this sample code snippet does. So in this code snippet, we have a place where you can paste that the API that you just built on BuildShip. So what you'll do is copy over this one to here, which I have already done. And then you have a couple of things to take care of. So what it's doing here is simply fetching that data from that API. If there is a good response, it displays that data. For display data, it's a function here, which I'll go through in 1 second. But if there is something wrong with the API, something's not wrong, right with the way you built a workflow, it goes into this error state and says inside your console log of your website, error fetching the data from API. So you can actually look at that and debug this further. Okay, so when things are going well, it's going into this display data function. And what this does is tries to replace every card with every API element that you get from the JSON. Okay, so to give you a better understanding, like if I pull this data from this API, I'm just using something like Hopscotch. You can use Postman to just assess this API. And as you can see, every item has all these things, right? So if I go to Webflow and I see that, hey, there is a sample card already. We had given it the card name card style, the ID name to be card style. So if I go back here, you'll see what I mean. So this card inside settings, you have this ID to be card style, right? So that's what I'm picking up, and I'm going back to the code, and I'm saying here that, hey, there is a document element by the name, the container of the document called card grid. This is the above the card. Inside that, there is an element called card style, right? And for each item in the data that you're getting from the API, so this is the API data, right? So this data that you passed into this display data, for every item in that array, take that card style, create a sample card, and if you're not able to create, I just added extra additional logging. We don't need that if things are working fine. But essentially, if it's not able to create a sample card, it'll just say that make sure you have a ID called sample card in your, it should be called ID called card style in your card. And then what it's doing is creating a clone of this card, right? So once it creates a clone of this card, then it replaces every item in the card with the incoming data. So here I can say that it's setting the attribute to be ID to be nothing, and then the card's title to be replaced by the item, this current looping item, the name from the JSON, and replaces the text with that. And then similarly, it does the same for description, category, and price. So one thing to make sure here, if things are not working, things are not showing up, is to make sure this ID and this item are correctly mapped. So this ID on your Webflow items ID, which is going back here. Oops, cancel. Okay, let's just say changes, fine. This item. So every item has this selector, the card title, the card description. So that matches with every item of the array. So if there's any typo here or anything with capitalization issue, that's when you kind of get tripped up. So make sure this is matching, and then every item in this array also is matching. So if you make it like description with a small d, it will not work. So make sure it is capital D, and so on. So once you have mapped all this out, you are here just appending it back to the container. So it'll start creating these cards for every data from the API. Now, I know that I didn't go over this image because I'll come back to it in a second. So let's just focus on the text fields for now. So as you can see, if I go back here and say publish this website, and I come back here and I refresh this, you'll see that it has fetched all this data from the API and is showing that. And you can also see the first sample card is not showing up anymore because I can go here and make this display none. Yeah, and then let me publish it. So let me refresh it. So this, yeah, so looks like it's the other way around. Okay, and I need to just refresh it now. Yeah, so previously I had made it visible and I published it, so that's why it showed up. Now I made it invisible and published it. So you just need to make sure you wait for the publish to actually be done and then refresh the page. The sample card is gone. The cloned cards have fetched the data from this Google Sheet, and that's kind of basically how you have set up this whole thing. Okay, now this looks very plain and vanilla. Let's add the image as well. Now for the image, it's slightly different. So on this second sheet, I've just copied a bunch of URL for images. Actually, it's the same image repeated many times, but you can obviously change this. So for example, this image, some furniture store, I just picked up this. So assume that you have URL for PNG or like JPEG or whatever here in this final column. Then you go back to your BuildShip workflow, and there's nothing to change here because in BuildShip, we are not saying pick up this column, this column. We are picking up all the data. So image will be automatically picked up. So if I were to test this API without doing any change on BuildShip, actually, let's make sure the URL is correct here. Yeah. Yeah, I need to send the JSON. Let me actually test it here. So the same thing, you can test it here, is the same concept. So let me test it here. Cool. So I can see now the image is also picked up the URL. So going back to Webflow, how do we map this image? So back to our settings at the body. Here we have mapped previously all the text fields and so on. Now, if I go to the image section, it's slightly different because it says create a alien. So if there is image item in the fetch data, so make sure there's an image, otherwise you will show that broken image kind of a thing. Then what you do is to this from this item you add the source for the image item. You create an element called image, like the HTML tag image, and then the source is whatever is coming from the JSON, the URL, and you prepend this image to the card. You can, I mean, that'll go at the very top. That means, right? Like if you append, it'll go at the very bottom. You can shift the location and so on. But let's save this. I mean, it's already published, right? Like I actually just can refresh and I think the images will show up. There you go. So as you can see, we have added the image. Now obviously all these images are the same repeated PNG, right? One interesting thing you could do is, say suppose you have hundreds of rows here and you don't want to manually sit and add the image. A thing you can do is go back to BuildShip, create another workflow which gets the data from this Google Sheet just like this. But instead of this column being manually entered, this could be empty, and your BuildShip workflow can run one time, create an image with AI and put it there. So we have lots of AI nodes. So you can actually, if you search for image, you have OpenAI image generator, replicate, stability, hugging face, whatever AI model there is out there for creating image. You can take that. The prompt can be the description that you see here. For example, um, here what the description is like, hey, this is a luxurious sofa and this and that, and then you can create an image, and then you can use the Google Sheets up, update data, the update sheet one, to insert that URL. You can also host these images on storage. BuildShip comes with built-in storage. So you can actually put these images in storage so that you're not hosting it somewhere else and coming back and forth. So we have like the upload file that gets created in these AI models. You can also use any cloud storage like AWS S3, for example, or Google Cloud. So whatever storage that you want to use, you can use it. And the best part, as I said, like everything, you can look at the code and make changes. Mostly you don't need to, but you can create your own node. So if you're using some other cloud storage that's not there here as a pre-built node, you can create your own by saying, hey, given a URL, I want to upload to the storage and I want to return the uploaded public URL. Here is a sample code snippet of how to upload to that. So you can just take a copy paste from their documentation, paste it here, and generate a node for you. And then you can test this node, make sure it works exactly the way you want, and then proceed. So everything step by step you test, you connect and you ship. So, okay, coming back. So as I said, like you can create these images also yourself, but for this demo, let's just leave it statically like this. So as you can see, what we have done so far is we have taken a sample card, populated with data from API, the image, text, and so on. You can style this card any way you want. And that's the good thing about Webflow. You have that full flexibility to visually create that look and feel of your app. And that's it. Now you have something that is displaying data from API. You can also like do things like categories based filter. Now for that, I'll give you an idea how to do it. So you will have something above this grid, right? You will have something like a, let's say, another container and then a bunch of text. So for example, even this is like a thing that is kind of categorizing things. You can go into different pages. So when you click on something, instead of all the data being shown in this get request, you will append that category. So for example, in the API, the get request, actually, yeah, let me change this to get request, right? I think that's what the problem here was. So if you do the API call just like that, you get all these things. But if you append it with category equals sofa, I think like that. Yeah, as you can see, everything came back with sofa category. So if you append it with table, it'll come back all with table. So that's all you need to do. In this URL, you will be basically passing in this part of based on what the user has clicked. So instead of it being this whole API, you will actually pass in a variable that will be appending as well. So this advanced section of how to build that, we will also cover in the next series. We'll keep building upon this. So I would love to learn what you are building and what ideas you would like. So here we can go further in the series around API, filtering, and so on. But there are also other things you can do here. So you can do things like putting data into the Webflow CMS. So here there is a CMS section, right? So if you had a collection here, we have things on BuildShip. So let me go to something here. Let me create like Webflow, right? Like there are lots of Webflow nodes. So you can get an item from a CMS and update it. You can add things to product listing. You can, um, get some list of pages in your website. So there are lots of templates of nodes in your workflow that you can add. And we also have inside our triggers a Webflow trigger. So this creates a real-time update whenever an action is made on the Webflow site. So this is like a webhook that Webflow sends when something happens in your website, like if something is published and so on. So you can also add this one to trigger a workflow rather than an API generated trigger. So you can do that, and you can also do things like a form submission. If a form is submitted, a button is clicked, and it goes to an API and then does a bunch of actions like the lead generation one. So there are a lot of things you can do. You let us know in the comments of what you would like us to build, and we will go through them. And we have actually a couple of more interesting series of live streams planned. So there is one we are coming up next week on December 3rd. So depending on your time zones, we'll put a link for that. You can sign in for that. What this one we're going to do is do it along with the Webflow's team, officially do a live stream with them, where we will build this game of detective who's the murderer game that is popular. But instead of like a static game, you can actually tell the theme, and this gameplay will automatically be generated. It'll create these assets, it'll create the story, it'll create these suspects, it'll create the audio for everyone, so that this page, all the contents is dynamically created based on the theme that someone has entered. And then you can play the game, you can listen to the audio, listen to the clues, read the text, look at the images, and select who's the suspect, and then it will say whether you're correct or not. So this is an idea of a game. Obviously you can take this and make this any way you like. And the interesting thing is, on Webflow side, you can visually make it appealing. You can create like animation effects. You can do things like cards in 3D style and whatnot. And on the BuildShip side, you can go as deep and complex here, where you're building the entire gameplay strategy in parallel. On parallelly in a node. One side you can create images, one side you can create audio, one side you can create like a story in text and merge all of them and come back. So this is going to be a more advanced app that you can build. But hopefully the session today lays the groundwork for how to use an API on Webflow, build an API on BuildShip, and start connecting them. And some of the tools that you, while you're doing this, right, it might not be working on the first time. What we encourage is like debug and test. So to show you how typically we do that is, we first look at the console logs, right? I had actually printed all the objects that are coming in, right? So that you can look at what is coming and make sure it's mapped correctly. So if you go on Webflow side, on this section here, you can add things like console log of items. And if any of this code is not clear or confusing, you can literally take this whole thing, put it on like a chat GPT or Claude, and ask it to like, hey, I want to add this field, and this is my selector name, can you append it? Or this is not working, or show if there's an error in the console log, take that and paste that there, it'll fix it for you. And then on the BuildShip side also, we have all the tools for visually debugging and testing. So as I already told, we have node level testing, we have testing at the workflow level. You can also save values. So here in this recent executions, you can save them as examples so that you can repeatedly try again for them. We also have node level unit test. So things that you would want to repeatedly run on the node, make sure all the corner cases are covered and it checks out whenever you create your own custom node. We also have these logs that are detailed for every run of your API call. So let me expand this. So you can see every time a workflow is called, what are the inputs, what is the output. You can expand and see what happens. So you can also log this log and debug it further. So in that spirit of experimentation and creativity, we would love to see what you're building, help you in this process of learning and building things. We love to see what the advanced, technically challenging and creative visual things that are being built, and also something that is impactful for a lot of people. So something that's solving real world problem for lots of uh, folks in different businesses and organizations and across industries. Yeah, so repeat one more time, what is the submission criteria? Obviously, we, as I said, we have a Discord community. You can join us there. We have a dedicated channel for this hackathon, so you are able to maybe team up with people, or create something that would be something that you need advanced answers and questions. You can collaborate there. And also for the purpose of submitting the deadline is January 2nd. There's still a lot of time, but this is what you need to do to submit. You'll effectively create a workflow on BuildShip. It could be one or more workflows, and you will put all of them inside a folder with a README. So you know how to create a folder, right? Like here, you just create folder, and then you create a README by clicking Create README. And inside the README, you will just add as much information about how to use this template. Here is the sample values, how to test each API, and also a link to your Webflow URL. So this could be like a website like this. It need not be custom domain. It can be just a free tier domain. You can just put a link for that, and also a 1-minute video explaining what you have done, so that we can easily understand what's going on. So also, if anything you want to highlight or showcase, that 1-minute video is your chance to do it. So yeah, that's the thing. And then once you have created this, you will just click publish to the community, and then we will be able to look at it. And make sure in the top of this, you just put the hashtag that I have highlighted here, Webflow BuildShip at the title, so that we make sure it's from your submission and not a general submission to the community. All right, so that's all that I had for today. And I just want to quickly scan to see if there are any questions. I know that some of you might find this basic, or some of you might find this advanced. So we want to cater to all types of audience. So today's session was a bit more towards beginner friendly, intermediate, and then we will have the next week's session, which is a bit more advanced. So make sure you tune in for that. So all the list of events for our hackathon are coming up on this. So here's the next one that's coming, so you can sign up for it. And as always, we are available on Discord, and we love chatting with folks. And we love to hear from you what you're building and how else we can support you. So that's it from me today. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll also post like snippets of this. And if you have any further questions, we can also create like a quick live stream office hours later in the week as well. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we have a great rest of your day.